Welcome to FHFA's virtual roundtable discussion. This roundtable is being conducted in conjunction with the Federal Home Loan Bank System at 100, Focusing on the Future initiative. This event is being recorded. Today, we will explore access to the Federal Home Loan Bank System in Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands. I would like to welcome our roundtable participants, as well as those who are live streaming the discussion on FHFA's website. Also, I'd like to say good morning to all of you. It's morning there, right? So it's evening here. So I think that shows how far apart we are geographically. So my name is Eric Howard, and I'm a principal policy analyst in FHFA's Federal Home Loan Bank's Affordable Housing Branch. And I'm joined by Renicia Glass, and she's a senior examiner in FHFA's Office of Affordable Housing Programs Examinations. So before I begin, I would like to provide some brief background information about the Federal Home Loan Bank System for the benefit of our viewers. The Federal Home Loan Bank System was created 90 years ago by the Federal Home Loan Bank Act as a government-sponsored enterprise to support mortgage lending and related community investment. The Federal Home Loan Bank System provides its members, which are thrift institutions, commercial banks, credit unions, insurance companies, and certified community development financial institutions, with a source of funding for mortgages and asset liability management, liquidity for their short-term needs, and additional funds for housing finance and community development. Approximately 80% of U.S. lending institutions rely on the Federal Home Loan Banks. With that, let's discuss why we are here today. This roundtable is part of the second phase of our Federal Home Loan Bank System at 100, Focusing on the Future initiative. In mid-2022, FHFA Director Sandra Thompson announced that FHFA would begin a comprehensive review of the Federal Home Loan Bank System. As a result, FHFA has sponsored a number of listening sessions and roundtable discussions. We kicked off the initiative with a three-part listening session, and FHFA hosted the inaugural roundtable just about 4.5 months ago in Washington, D.C., where we explored questions on the mission and purpose of the Federal Home Loan Bank System. We've been very pleased with the high level of stakeholder interest in this initiative, including those who are involved in supporting affordable housing, community and economic development, banking and housing finance, as well as those in academia and in research. Video recordings and transcripts of the events are available on the FHFA website, and I would encourage anyone watching today to watch those discussions as well. For today's roundtable discussion, as we have with all roundtable discussions, we welcome bold ideas. We also welcome recommendations that can be implemented in the near term. As I mentioned earlier, the Federal Home Loan Bank System has remained a critical source of liquidity since its inception 90 years ago. This is especially true during times of market stress, and particularly for smaller members that often haven't had access to other sources of funding. During this roundtable discussion, we're going to be asking some questions about the Federal Home Loan Bank System's role or potential role in addressing the housing and community development needs of Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands, as well as access to the Federal Home Loan Bank System products and services. We look forward to the discussion today and the feedback we will receive as we continue this initiative. And with that, let me turn it over to Renicia, who will share the guidelines for our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. I'm looking this way because Eric is actually sitting right next to me to my right. So if that happens, know that that's why, and I'm to his left. Let's review some of the rules of engagement. First, Eric and I will be moderating for the discussion today. We will be posing questions to you. We expect and hope that we will have an open and engaging discussion. No recommendation or view should be considered off the table. And we encourage you to offer differing views about some of the important questions that we will be covering. We also want this to be orderly. When you would like to speak, or if you are asked to speak, please unmute your microphone and mute after you have finished speaking. You may use the raise your hand feature that's available to us in Zoom to signal when you'd like to speak. Please also keep your camera on for the duration of the roundtable. First, we ask that everyone engage in the discussion knowing that we may or may not disagree on all points, but any differences will be shared in a respectful manner. To ensure that everyone has a turn to speak and we are covering each discussion topic, if someone is going long, Eric or I may interject to keep the conversation moving. Second, this review is meant to give a voice to the earnest thinking of the Federal Home Loan Bank System stakeholders and highlight areas for further consideration. We ask that you give us the best thinking and not just your thinking or what may be possible. Third, for the benefit of our audience, the roundtable participants have been given a set of prompts that we will reference during the course of today's discussion. Finally, we have a disclaimer that we need to make you all aware of, and I'll be reading that verbatim, like I've read everything else verbatim thus far. We have organized this roundtable to obtain your input on the mission of the Federal Home Loan Banks, including input on several specific questions that were sent to you prior to this meeting. During today's session, FHLBank FHFA will not discuss the status or timing of any potential rulemaking. If FHFA does decide to engage in a rulemaking on any matters discussed today, this meeting would not take the place of a public comment process. The rulemaking document would establish the public comment process, and you would need to submit your comments, if any, in accordance with the submission instructions in that document. FHFA may summarize the feedback gathered at today's session in a future rulemaking document. If we determine that a summary would be useful to explain the basis of a rulemaking, anything said in this meeting, and that also includes reactions, nodding, eye rolling, should not be construed as binding on or a final decision by the director of FHFA or FHFA staff. Any questions that we may have are focused on understanding your views and do not indicate a policy or legal position. Participants in today's roundtable may have a financial interest, whether direct or indirect, on outcomes that may affect the Federal Home Loan Banks and their businesses. As Eric mentioned, today's roundtable will be live streamed on FHFA's website and video recorded. FHFA may also prepare a transcript of today's session, which would include the names of all speakers and the organizations they represent, if any. The recording and any transcripts prepared will be posted on FHFA's website and YouTube channel, along with any materials being presented today or otherwise submitted in conjunction with the roundtable. With that said, we'd like to start the roundtable with discussions. Let me ask that each of you, I'm sorry, not with discussions, with introductions. I'll ask that each of you introduce yourself and state your affiliation with the Federal Home Loan Bank System, whether that be in your current capacity or a former capacity. Let's start with Gerard and work our way around to everyone else.
Thanks, everyone. Gerard Cruz. We are members of the Federal Home Loan Bank, formerly Seattle, now Des Moines.
Is that all you want to share, Gerard?
Well, except that I'm excited to listen to the views of the others that are part of this group and share some of the issues that affect us here in Guam.
Thank you. Like Eric said earlier, we welcome your participation.
Thank you.
What about Maria?
Good day, everyone. My name is Maria Leon Guerrero. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Bank of Guam, and we too are members of the Federal Home Loan Bank Des Moines, and we have been for as long as I've been in my position. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Thank you. What about Mary?
Good day. My name is Mary Guerrero. I'm an administrator with the Guam Housing Corporation, a government agency. We are an autonomous agency, and I've been here for quite a while, and we're not a member with the Federal Home Loan Bank, but we do have, we had a relationship where we were able to borrow from them. So that's what I have now, and we look forward to seeing how best we can address some of the issues that we have on the table in affordable housing. Thank you.
Fantastic, Mary. What about you, Jesse?
Today, good morning and good evening to all of you. My name is Jesse Palacios. I'm the corporate director here at the Northern Mariana Housing Corporation. We are not a member of your banking system. However, I recall that back in 2000 or 2001, some of our low-income families received was it AHP grants to help them out with down payment for some of the houses that we developed. So that was a big help for the families back then, and that was the last time we had any kind of AHP assistance. So yeah, we look forward to learning more about the programs, and hopefully we can become members in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. Philip?
Yeah, hello, Alpha Day and Sudusmasi. Thank you for holding this. It's great. It's first time of which I'm aware that the Home Loan Bank has reached out to us. I think I've been doing banking the longest of all of us. I remember when the Federal Home Loan Bank was actually a supervisory agent. I'm also a member of the board of Seattle. So looking forward to what you have to say. You know, Guam and the CNMI are like so many other places. There's not a lot of demand, at least on our part, for advances at this point. We had the good old surge deposits, trying to figure out what to do with them and making sure we don't do with our surge deposits what Silicon Valley did with theirs. And so looking forward to today. And again, thank you, because it's a great idea on your part to be reaching out to us.
Thank you. We are so looking forward to kicking things off with you now. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eric to get us started.
Great, thank you, Anicia. So, you know, I think I mentioned, as Jesse did, that it's morning there and it's evening here. So there's some distance between us. And I personally have never been to Guam or the Northern Marianas. So what we'd like to do is let's level set. Let's understand what your housing needs are in Guam and the Northern Marianas. And if you can just tell us what we need to know. We really appreciate that as we dive into this conversation. And with that, if it's okay, Mary, I'm going to start with you.
Okay, so in Guam, our issues in affordable housing is the cost of housing that is available for resale, and the amount that an applicant or first-time homeowner may be able to borrow. There is a big gap right there. Even with other programs that we've established to address down payment, to address what can we do to maybe develop homes so that we can decrease the cost of housing right now, because it is very high, for at least for those that even beyond the income that we are mandated to serve. I think there are very few that can actually afford what's out there for resale. So in addressing that for the resale, and we looked at maybe construction activity, developing it so that we can maybe then control the costs of the homes. Even that, with the high costs and the unavailability of some contractors that are willing to basically drop the cost so that it can become affordable, it seems we're not getting really the interest, and there are various issues that may cost that. And one of them is they don't have the manpower. At one time they didn't have, they were subcontractors to military projects. They just would be spreading themselves thin really to try to undertake any additional construction on a case by case. So that's basically the concern. The construction cost is high, the cost of homes are high, and the amount that the first-time homeowner may be able to borrow is insufficient. Thus, the gap is quite wide for us to try to address those that want to realize home ownership.
I have a question. Mary, for perspective, because like Eric said, we haven't been to Guam, unfortunately. We tried to actually have this roundtable there. I begged for it, but nobody listened to allow us the opportunity to come out and participate in person. For perspective, what type of what would be a more reasonable type of down payment would a buyer get for a home? What would be an affordable home price? Just ballpark it for me. And then what would you consider a reasonable amount that a buyer would need in down payment assistance in your area? Again, ballpark it.
Okay, with Guam Housing Corporation, we tried, well, first of all, our mandate, we can't assist anyone for financing unless they're unable to get financing through conventional means. So what that means is they would have to try to get a conventional loan before they come over to Guam Housing. So already at that point, if they are denied, there are some challenges with down payment. Most of those that come to us are really seeking 100% financing. They do not have the capability of a down payment other than what we can provide as a grant for the down payment assistance program for your closing costs. That we can help if the amount to purchase does not exceed 420. That's what it is now, 420,000. And that's a grant that they may be able to receive. If they meet all the qualifications, all the eligibility requirements, they may get up to $10,000. So that would address their closing, but it's usually more than that, but it would at least lessen the amount that they would have to cough up. For down payment, really, most of our potential borrowers are looking for 100% financing, and we could provide such, but depending on their income, depending on the appraisal, that would have to be determined.
So you're looking for 100%, and you're thinking I'm not going to say the average housing cost, but the costs are around $420,000 for a single family home.
That is what's appearing in terms of if they were going to purchase. But if they were to do any type of construction, most of those that are coming through us are looking at anything below $250,000 for construction.
Okay. Just trying to give us an idea of how much an individual buyer might need in down payment assistance for a house that costs how much. And I think you've helped me with that. Thank you so much.
Mary, I did have a follow-up on that. So you talked about new construction. Is existing housing, is that an option, rehabbing existing housing, or is there the supply not there?
The supply of housing on the resale is really existing homes. It's really not there for the clients that we are mandated to serve. So that's why we have to lean more towards construction, so that the prices then can be controlled, provided they own the land, and that would already cut some of the costs.
You did say, I just to better understand, down payment assistance, closing costs. that comes through the Guam Housing Corporation? Are there other participants that provide down payment assistance or closing costs to your homeowners, your households, your clients?
The down payment and closing cost assistance program that we do have is available even to all the banks that are a participating lender. So it's not just geared towards Guam Housing's borrowers, but even those from the banks that, as long as they don't exceed what our board has determined to be the median price, and that is subject to change depending on what's out there. They are eligible to come and apply, and I tell you, the banks have participated, and we don't discourage, we just process it on a first come, first served basis. And as long as funding is available, we would continue to make that program available.
Okay, thank you. So anyone else in Guam, would you like to add to Mary's description of the housing environment climate there?
Hi, I was just gonna add some data, but I think maybe Mary and I are looking at the same data, which is good. So there's a really great real estate appraisal firm here that tracks a variety of data in our market. And I jotted it down before our meeting just to share. So median prices for a single family dwelling in 2019 was just under 300,000, 299,000. The same home in 2022 is 420,000. So in just a few short years, that's pretty significant. So at that 2019 value, a 20% down payment, we're looking at 60 grand. Today, that's 84 grand. That's more than most people make in 1 year or even 2 in our market. So, Mary explained the cost of construction has skyrocketed since the pandemic started. Some of that is supply chain issues, but primarily it's the shortage of construction labor. I'm sure you all know that there's a big military presence here, and they're just going gangbusters, which is great for the economy, but they are absorbing the lion's share of all the construction resources. So those, for residential construction, those that are able to secure contractors, if they're lucky enough, it's quite expensive. So it's really it's an issue of affordability, not at least for our bank, and I believe I shouldn't speak for the rest, but I don't think liquidity is the issue. It's just the affordability of it. That's what I want to add. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I was just going to jump on that and say that, yeah, the bigger issue is repayment ability rather than down payment assistance, because the private market offers 100% financing, the low down payment financing, and for first-time home buyers, closing cost assistance as well. But what we're seeing from where we sit is that without rising interest rates, rising costs, the affordability relies the unaffordability comes down to the borrower's ability to repay or qualifying for a lot less because interest rates are higher. And that squeezes them obviously out of the market, and it reduces the amount that they're able to qualify for. So that's what we're seeing from where we sit.
The 6% is the new 12, in the sense that a generation or people entering their buying careers, working careers, mortgages were 5%, 4%, 3%, sometimes even lower, even fixed rates. And of course, ARMs were even lower than that. And so when the rates started climbing last year ago this month, a lot of people just said, wow, 7%. Whereas in previous times, people would have said, wow, it's down to 7%. So there's a psychological thing. People say, well, that's way too expensive. And as I think, as was pointed out, prices have gone up a lot because there's a demand, but there's a limited supply. And for new construction, it was also pointed out, we have a large military buildup going on in the northern part of the island. And all the large contractors are winning the contracts. They need more labor force than they can than their own forces. So they're hiring a lot of the smaller contractors who would have built my house. They're subcontracted to them. So those contractors are working what we call behind the fence. So you have a double-edged problem there. There are a lot of one-offs being built by some aggressive entrepreneurial small contractors are building 3, 4, 5 homes at a time in places 10 years ago you never thought they'd be building, but that's where it's being built because land has also increased. It's, you know, it's not just Guam, it's everywhere. I think the only places land's not increased might be the CNMI because of certain issues over there. But so it's an affordability, and people are scared by 7% loan, scared of a 7% loan. I think those prices that we referred to earlier, that the appraiser referenced from now versus 2 years from now ago, I think those prices are going to peak this year and start coming down. Whenever something runs up that quickly, pop goes the bubble. And that's what it is. It's kind of a bubble. How much can I get out of my house? And if you talk to realtors, they are already seeing sellers discounting the price on their homes because they're not getting people to buy. Not that there's not a demand. It's just that people can't afford the payments, and as Jerry said, but it is also the down payments. If I ask you to come up with $80,000, well, you know, if I'm living in the Bay Area, that's not a problem for a lot of people. But if you knock on the regular door in Guam, because we're a low income area, middle to low income, they don't have 80,000 sitting in the bank. They're going to borrow it from their parents or aunts and uncles or somebody else in the family. But not everybody can do that. I think that's what's slowing down. I don't know about the other lenders, but for what we see, the month-end closings, everybody's slowing down heavily on residential lending. So it's not just Rocket Mortgage, it's not just Wells Fargo. Apparently something's going on everywhere. So how can you help us?
Thank you, Philip. Before we, well, Jesse, we want to hear about what's happening there in your area, but then I have a follow-up question for you, Mary.
Okay, it's pretty much the same here in the Northern Marianas, just as in Guam. However, our construction prices for homes are much lower than Guam. What we're seeing now is around 250,000 for a 3-bedroom, fully concrete home. Before that, it was way below 200,000. Guam has the military buildup going on over there, which is great. But in terms of contractors, the same is over here, not because of the military buildup, but because of the disaster that we had in 2018, the super typhoon. So we still have a lot of FEMA and HUD infrastructure projects that are in the A&E phase, and it's not quite there yet for the actual groundbreaking. We've had a couple of groundbreaking ceremonies already for HUD, and I was just discussing that with Jerry earlier today. And this is our beach road project. It's undergoing repairs right now, and it was caused by the super typhoon U2. And when it comes to building homes, reconstructing homes, we are having issues as well with the limited supply of manpower. We have quite a few contractors, but these contractors want more of the big projects, not your $250,000 new construction home. They want the ones with two commas, not just one comma. And that's the issue. And with regard to labor, again, we have to import labor into the CNMI from foreign countries, mainly from the Philippines. because there's just not that, the local labor force, you just cannot supply the, the workers. There's still a stigma amongst the locals here that the government is the main employer. The people would rather work for the government than work out there under the sun, with, working for a construction company. With our CDBG DR, that's the HUD program that we receive money from. We set aside some of the funds for the construction trades for scholarship, so that we could help out the Marianas in having more skilled workers that are from here, instead of importing foreign workers from abroad.
Thank you, Jesse. I guess I would wonder in general too, we talked about single family homes, but no one really spoke about rental housing. So I would wonder about that. But before I wonder too much, I wanted to follow up with Mary, because she said that you used to have a past relationship with the Federal Home Loan Banks. I wanted to make sure, were you a housing associate, or do you don't have it anymore? I'm assuming. What was that past relationship?
Well, we were able to borrow from Federal Home Loan Bank for lending capital.
Through a member organization?
Well, we weren't a member, so we would have
Right.
to sponsor or from a member bank. I'm not even sure. I wasn't really involved with that. I just know that
It took place before.
borrowed from Federal Home Loan Bank then. And that was for the use of lending capital.
Okay.
And it was a collateral loan, because we had to provide the collateral of the loans that we originated from them.
Okay, I think I understand. You used a member bank for a loan that came from the Federal Home Loan Bank, I think is what we're getting to. Okay, and then just generally, before we move on to the next topic, rental housing. Anybody?
Can I jump in and comment on that, about the Guam Housing's loan, the Home Loan Bank? It was a troubled asset. I'm gonna say this was in the 90s or the 2000s, excuse me. It was, I think it was 17 million, Mary. It was a troubled asset. Home Loan Bank came out and asked for help trying to get it collected, which involved getting some legislation through so that the Housing Corp could make it a priority, a prioritized liability, so payments would go right through it. So
That's
I
right.
think at that point, maybe the Home Loan Bank System said, oh, gee, let's not deal with them anymore. It has changed since. And if the Home Loan Bank is interested or can deal with an operation like Guam Housing, I would say you can now, because where Mary sits today is much better than it was 15 years ago.
Yeah, I think I recall that, Phil. I think it had to do with the initial it was a mortgage revenue bond that was floated that was supposed to support affordable housing. And I think the way it was structured wasn't successful. So the Federal Home Loan Bank, right, in the early 2000s came and asked the other banks, the member banks, to support.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much for sharing that with us. Gonna move on. Eric has another question for you.
Well, I just wanted to ask more about the needs there and the populations that you have there. So can you, Philip, if you could, can you talk about the indigenous population, the housing needs of the Chamorros, and if there are any programs that are in place for them, or anything you want to tell us about their needs? Philip, did you hear my question?
Yeah, I guess silence is golden on this one. But
Oh,
I'll
okay.
jump in and see what I can get, because I might not have all the right agencies correct, but we have a Chamorro Land Trust Commission. And Chamorros make up about 35% of our population, 40% at the max. But the Chamorro Land Trust takes excess land and gives it out to Chamorros for building. It's difficult to have that. It's a lease, if I'm correct, a 99-year lease. It's a difficult instrument on which to lend money. And if I was with the Chamorro Land Trust, I would try to contact you to see if you could help with the lending, the guarantee of the lending. If we knew we could lend money to a Chamorro Land Trust recipient, and there was some backing from the Federal Home Loan Bank, because these are lower income applications, it'd be easier for us to jump in. I'll also go back to the Chamorro population in Saipan, or the CNMI. When Bank Pacific went into the CNMI in 1992, they had a housing corporation, which was then called Mariana Island Housing Authority, and it still exists today, just under a different name. And they had lent all their money out that they could. So we said, we'll be your partner, and we'll buy your loans. We'll be your secondary market. We'll buy your loans, and then we'll give you the money. You make more loans. We'll buy those. You make more loans, and they liked it. And because at that point, if you were in the CNMI, a home loan was like 17%, 15% for 7 years. That's not a home loan. That's a loan to drive you off island, go live elsewhere. So we entered into that, but we knew they were high risk loans. That's why somebody was going to the housing board. And we asked for a guarantee, which we worked with our attorneys, with their attorneys. Again, this is 1992. We probably wrapped it up in early 93. And we all signed off on it. It was wonderful. We bought 14, 15, $60 million worth of loans, which was good because those were just put out again. And then we had one default 6-7 years later. And so we exercised the guarantee. They had new management at that point, new attorneys, and they fought us. And the court overturned, said there was no guarantee, or the guarantee was unenforceable, which we said, wow, it doesn't make us want to do business with them anymore. And it was like, well, you can understand. But if something, we do it again, if we knew there was some type of guarantee agreement that the government could not renege on and say, go away, because it costs us a lot of money, which gave us a really bad taste in our mouth for dealing with the CNMI Housing Corporation, which we don't do anymore. And I don't think anybody else does. But if that exposure could be erased, I think that you'd find some of us willing to go back in and help the Mariana Islands Housing Corporation.
Thank you.
I'm not beating up Saipan, although I'm beating up Saipan. You guys screwed us.
Okay. So just to follow up on that, Mary, you noted or mentioned the Chamorro Land Trust in your response to the questions we sent out, and you were talking about under their inventory that there are properties that have yet to be surveyed and not equipped with infrastructure. Is there any activity that the Guam Housing Authority Corporation is involved in, or do you have any other information that you can add to what Philip has told us?
Right now, for the Chamorro Land Trust, there are only 2 lenders that have provided financing for the construction on Chamorro Land Trust. We are one of them. Actually, I think we only had about 30 loans under the Chamorro Land Trust, and they do issue a loan guarantee. What we have done, and the other one is the U.S. Veterans Administration. They also do Chamorro Land Trust and the Native Loan Program. So they provide financing for those veterans that have the long-term lease. GHC, Guam Housing Corporation, is involved in both assisting the Veterans Administration in the event they do go in default. We're required in our agreement, our MOUs, to advise Guam Housing when the loan is delinquent so that we can remedy with Chamorro Land Trust how we can still get the loans performing and not exceed a 60-day where they're already entering into a notice of default. And based on that, so that would prevent them from actually paying off the loan in full if the loan remains at least performing, so that the VA can continue servicing the account. For ours, we do the same thing, and the way it's designed. So if one becomes, in our loan, if one becomes non-performing, then we already seek Chamorro Land Trust to the commission to seek for another potential that would be willing to assume the loan, because they have a lot of applicants in the Chamorro Land Trust that are waiting for any type of lease, and they're still vetting that process and going down the line so that nobody skips, nobody's out of turn. So there are like 10,000 applicants. So with that number standing by for a lease, and if nobody is, I mean, it would be really hard for someone that wouldn't want to assume that loan at that term, or we can even refinance it. So I think there's mechanisms to make it work, to keep the loan either performing or assumed by another eligible. And we defer to Chamorro Land Trust Commission to find us that applicant. The term is for 99 years. If they want to if Chamorro Land Trust wants to assume the loan until they do find, then that's what we encourage, because we are involved in the servicing for the Chamorro Land Trust Commission's loan portfolio.
Okay, thank you. So, before we move on, just want to give Jesse an opportunity is there any programs or any information that you'd like to share with us that with respect to the indigenous populations of Chamorros in the Northern Marianas?
Sure, Eric. Yeah, here in the CNMI, we have the Department of Public Lands that they are in charge of the all the public lands here, and they have a homestead program, and even in that program there are about, I believe there's around 6,000 applicants, and there's not that much land over here to give out, but it's not in the form of a lease, it's more of a ownership. They give you a homestead, then you have to develop the property by building a home, and after inspection they give you a quitclaim deed, and 10 years later it becomes private. For funding wise, for building homes, we provide funding here at the Northern Mariana Housing Corporation. We give them home loans from HUD, but the money we receive from HUD is very, very, very limited. We can only give out maybe less than 10 loans under the HUD program. We have a new MOU with USDA RD. They're going to come back and restart that program that they had back in the 90s. That's another avenue for homeowners to avail of assistance. We also have the Veterans Affairs program here that they offer assistance under the Native American Direct Loan program. So we have similar arrangements, just like Guam, where there's a local agency that deals with the indigenous, called the Northern Marianas Descent. And I don't know if you know that only people of Northern Marianas descent can own land here in the CNMI. For non-Northern Marianas descents, they can do a 55-year lease on the property.
Okay, thank you. This is a little interesting, a lot of information there. So we can always circle back if anybody wants to add anything else, but talking about housing conditions, Is there anything you would like to add with respect to climate change? I mean, Jesse talked about typhoon, the disaster that Northern Marianas is still recovering. What about considerations for climate change and housing? How is that? Is that complicating or even making things even more challenging?
I think for us, the 90s is when we experienced the onslaught of a number of typhoons that forced everybody who built or bought a home subsequent to that buy one that was hardened. So homes now are all built generally with concrete and able to withstand typhoon force winds. Most homes or many homes are now buying generators that have become more affordable. And you know, 2002, since 2002, Guam, knock on wood, hasn't been hit with a major typhoon. But having to do that, having to build a home that's hardened does come at a higher cost for sure. So that does affect affordability. I did want to talk about, because I recall on the Chamorro Land Trust, I'm sorry that I have to circle back, but I'll forget if I say it right now, that when we considered some time ago, and Mary, forgive me, because it has been some time that we've considered lending against Chamorro Land Trust, the primary issue for us was the inability for us to foreclose and open it up to the free market, to the open market, that we would have to then, if we took it back, we would have to sell it to somebody who then qualified under the Chamorro Land Trust restriction. That Chamorro, by definition, wasn't a special class like Native Hawaiian was or American Indian was. And so therefore, our attorneys were saying that we could be discriminating if we only sold those properties back to those who qualified under the Chamorro Land Trust Act. Remind me, again, that's my vague recollection of the reason why we didn't participate in a much more meaningful way in the Chamorro Land Trust home financing.
Okay, so you're right. You're not able to foreclose on that on the property in the Chamorro land property, but it was designed so that someone else that has been determined and is waiting on the list that has applied for Chamorro Land Trust would be given in that order the opportunity to purchase that. And that's the way I guess they kept it, so that in order for you to be eligible, you have to meet all the requirements, right? That was established by law.
Right.
And so what they did instead was did a loan guarantee, so that when they're supposed to be the ones to pay off the lender, and then the lender, and then they would be the one then to resell before it actually gets to that point where you're going to have to put it on a notice of sale and sell it in order to recover your loss. So it was structured so that it shouldn't get that far. It should have already been corrected, and that the loan then can be repaid by Chamorro Land Trust through that loan guarantee, so that they can then locate another applicant, so that they would assume, would purchase that or assume that loan, or just reapply for that. It has happened with the VA. That's how we were able to, they found somebody to assume the loan. So they do preventive measures, so it doesn't really get to that foreclosure proceedings where then you have it out for public auction. So I think that was the reason why that loan guarantee was designed, so that they can keep it and avoid the foreclosure proceedings, so that it can be resold or to another individual that meets that requirement. So it's all about the timeliness of how that loan is being serviced to keep it at a performing loan status.
I understand. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So we've spent some time talking about housing conditions in Guam, and we want to also move on so we can talk about your relationships or lack of relationships with the Federal Home Loan Bank. But just before we do that, Some of you have touched on, of course, housing stock and the affordability among across incomes and the impact of the pandemic. Is there anything else you would like us to know before we move on that you feel we need to know about housing in Guam and the Northern Marianas?
May I?
Yes.
I did mention in responding to those questions about the availability of funding for infrastructure, whether it be for Chamorro Land Trust, land inventory, or even private lands. There are still some areas that are lacking that infrastructure, or their properties so far in that they would have to address with the utility agencies how they can afford to get that infrastructure to that is fronting their property. We address issues how best they can, whether they do an interest-free loan and borrow to build, to put the infrastructure in. And of course, if those are off-site infrastructure, it's not going to bring the collateral, the appraisal for the collateral. It won't be sufficient because it's not an on-site. So we are looking at different types of financing availability for infrastructure. We wanted to know if Federal Home Loan Bank has any type of funding that maybe we can avail ourselves to address this, because there is a tract of land that Chamorro Land Trust has, and it's lacking the infrastructure, but they're ready in terms of surveying and everything. That's what's holding up. We've made some inquiries to other to rural housing service to see how best we can address the funding issue in the Chamorro Land Trust, and that's still ongoing. But they've identified a property. There's property right now that is ready for development. It's only the infrastructure that now is holding that, has become the obstacle in further developing that project. I don't know if by doing a development and including the infrastructure and then passing it on to the borrower, I don't know how that would make it affordable if we were to put that as a part of the equation on selling price. But in terms of infrastructure, there is a need for funding for infrastructure.
So just so we're getting ready to move on, but just how many units are we talking about when you talk about this land and the lack of infrastructure? How many would that be?
It's about 160
Okay.
units that is available, that they've identified that would be the best property to look for to develop.
Okay. So as you all know, time moves pretty quick. So this has all been very interesting. I'm going to pass the baton over to Renicia, who is going to talk to you about the current role of the Federal Home Loan Bank System.
Yes, Maria, you're on the hot seat now. And I wondered if you could kind of tell me, given that your organization is a member of the Federal Home Loan Bank of Des Moines, what is your role? What is your bank currently doing with the bank, or what they have done? What have they done in the past overall, but particularly with respect to housing?
Yeah, so honestly, I think we rarely, if ever, draw on our lines, only because our cost of funds is relatively low here in the islands with all our deposits. So we're not really using FHLB in that respect. And actually I'm also not aware of any of the programs that were available direct to the homeowners that we're availing of. I know that I am aware that we are using some of the Guam Housing Corporation's projects or programs in terms of helping homeowners meet their down payment and their closing costs. But beyond that, we're really not doing much. And so that's why I was interested today to hear about like what we are not aware of, what we're not taking advantage of. I do want to point out one thing that I don't think was covered today, and that is low-income housing. We do have, we talked about home ownership, but there are a lot of people who will probably never own a home. And we do have several developers out in this part of the world that do the low-income housing tax credit program. There are several of them, but even the inventory that they're able to put out is not as much as we need. The interesting thing about that program is that the investors, the tax credit investors, are primarily from the mainland. And I don't know if my colleagues here can add any color to this. This is my understanding. They're primarily from the mainland. And it's not clear as far as a local investor, even banks, to invest in these things. It's not clear if the local government will honor the tax credits because it is a federal program and our taxes stay here locally. So I think there's kind of it's just an interesting, weird thing that wouldn't you think that local companies should be more incentivized to invest in low-income housing tax credit projects for our community? But it's not the case. You have like Berkshire Hathaway are the ones who are investing in these projects in CNMI and in Guam, which is kind of interesting. But if there's anything that the Federal Home Loan Bank can do on the developer side to help make the economics of those projects more attractive, I think that's something that should be explored.
I think that my specialty is affordable housing. I have worked as a developer. I've worked for a Federal Home Loan Bank, and now I'm here at this agency. As I'm hearing you guys, there's so much that I want to share, but that's not what this actual forum is about. The things that I would like to share. But before I move on, and Maria, thank you for that, I would highly advise each of you to reach out to the Federal Home Loan Bank of Des Moines and see what it is that they have available to you. I'm hoping that someone from the bank is participating on this call tonight so that they are becoming aware of opportunities to interact with you guys. I'm sorry, Eric wants to share something with me.
No, I wanted to ask, we did take a look at projects that the Federal Home Loan Banks have awarded through their affordable housing program. There's a competitive program. And I just wondered if any of you or the member institutions that you represent or the housing authorities, if any of you have applied for any of the grant money that the bank awards every year. So I'm was curious about that. If that's something, are there projects, local projects, or there tax credit projects that are being sponsored through your member institutions that are applying for these awards?
Well, actually, it would need to be that the members are actually
Right.
making that available. So I guess that's for Maria and
Yeah.
Gerard and Philip. Are you making the first-time homebuyer program through the Federal Home Loan Bank available to your participants, to your customers?
I could say we're not, just real quickly, Maria, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but we've been, we're a community development credit union, we're a CDFI, so we have historically been very motivated to apply for competitive grants with each one of those organizations. But unless there's a set aside for Asia, Pacific Islanders, the Pacific Island region, our application is right in there with the bigger of them that have, by population, a larger impact to the funds that are being used in those locations. And so we haven't been successful in our applications. And so over time, our motivation has waned. And that's kind of where we are with generally competitive grant applications or funds that like that for us.
So, Gerard, the first-time homebuyer programs are set aside. They're not competitive programs.
Okay.
So basically, as a member of the Des Moines Bank, they announce annually what amount of money they are setting aside for their first-time homebuyer program. Typically, right now, most banks are doing about 35% of their AHP that they're allocating for the year. So it's not competitive. You could do one homeowner at a time to go in and requests. I don't know what the max is. I think the reg allows what, 30% now, 25%.
29,000.
Yeah, 29,000, which is something I really should know. But yeah,
I think the last one we participated in was a program with the Federal Home Loan Bank, called Saving Starts, where borrowers or savings for down payment was matched 3-to-1, 4-to-1.
yeah, I don't think that Des
Awesome.
Moines has a matching, but again, it's not a competitive program. So
Okay,
all you would have to do is register and go to their website and take a look. The first time home buyer programs they may have a secondary program that they're doing in a voluntary way that may be a bit more competitive, but the first time home buyer programs are not competitive in that way.
Gerard, and I'm going to open it up to other member institutions. What type of projects did you sponsor that applied for AHP grants? I mean, Renisi was talking about the set
I
aside,
don't know
which is a smaller portion, but different banks have different amounts that, and up to some over $1 million that
Right.
they award to affordable housing program or projects.
most of the ones that we applied for weren't through the Federal Home Loan Bank, they were through the CDFI fund.
Oh,
which
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll turn it back to you. Renisi.
Philip, what about you guys? How are you using the Federal Home Loan Bank now, or how have you used it in the past?
I don't think we're really using the bank right now because we have so much liquidity, so we're not going to look into to get some money. Though we have several times in the past drawn down on our line, but we haven't touched our line with you or the FRB since COVID. And we were selling some loans through mortgage purchase programs. We found we liked because it was you had better margins. It was better than selling them to Freddie. But we're not really generating that many more residential mortgages right now, or more into commercial and other consumer types than residential mortgages. So we're kind of like a silent partner just looking in. But we do have a huge issue in Guam of low income people and in the CNMI, low income individuals. And if we're not asking you to come out and guarantee loans that we make to borrowers we perhaps would not otherwise make a loan, but actually we are. And if there was a program to have like that, it would go a long way.
Of course, we can't speak to specifics again, but I would encourage each of you again to reach out to your reps at the Federal Home Loan Bank of Des Moines and ask them specifically what type of products they have available that can help you. And, to make contact with the community investment officer there as well. I hear opportunities here. I examined the affordable housing program at these banks, and I do hear some opportunities.
Maybe if they used the housing corporation up in the CNMI and Mary here with Guam Housing Corporation, it's something that they could originate, and we could all then, I think, participate, knowing that the Home Loan Bank there is somehow backstopping.
Yeah, like G.I. Joe says, and I forgot what he says, not knowledge is power, or I forget what it is. It's not knowledge is power, it's something else. And I say it all the time, but it escapes me. But if you have the opportunity to reach out to your member service reps and the community investment officers at the bank, they can tell you exactly how it is that the banks might be able to help you. Going to move on. We're ready to hear about how the system may expand access to its resources, which is really what I said. To the future role of the Federal Home Loan Banks may undertake to respond to challenges in Guam and in your areas. And we've kind of talked about that. You guys have actually pointed out some of the needs that you have and some of the things that you think that the banks might be able to help you with. But Gerard, you want to kick us off and kind of give us some more of your ideas about what it is that the bank, the Federal Home Loan Bank System can do, how the system might play a larger role in addressing your challenges, what the structural barriers are, how we might overcome some of them.
Well, I think basically forums like this are very helpful in just being able to know what programs are available in a more continuous way. I mean, repetition helps for me to get the message to resonate. So forums like this would be helpful. I think it'd also be helpful if at the policy level, there was representation by somebody from a jurisdiction that has unique needs. 100% of everything that we use to build homes here has to come from somewhere other than the island. So everything is imported, including labor. Those are issues that are unique to the islands that I think would help to bring, as I mentioned earlier in one of my write-ups, context around some of the recommendations that are made and hopefully the policy decisions that are ultimately made at the board level of the Federal Home Loan Bank. So that would be helpful. We had some representation or just constant communication. I know over the last 3 years, COVID has reduced the number of in-person contacts from the Federal Home Loan Bank to us. We do have good representation from Eric Jennings, who's our rep, and so we do communicate with him often. Our CFO does actually. We do have a small advance, and most of it with the Federal Home Loan Bank, and most of it was done for because rates were so low, it was compelling enough for us to just take them down, and now we're glad we did. But COVID has done that. Hopefully, now that we're going back to in-person meetings, we'll be able to see more and hear more about what's available with the Federal Home Loan Bank. I don't know if anything systemically or system, needs to be changed with the system necessarily, but I think the reduction of the use of or feeling like we're in silos would be helpful now that we're able to communicate more frequently and more often, hopefully more so in person.
Jesse, what do you think is needed to kind of stimulate more engagement and actions to help you access the Federal Home Loan Bank's products?
Working for the government, for myself, I'm not really very familiar with the Federal Home Loan Bank system. So it's just more of awareness for us and what products the system offers and how we can help the community out here, because my agency, mainly deals with the HUD low income category families. There's annually HUD publishes the AMI for the CNMI, and those annual publications, they appear kind of low for us, and so we can only assist those families that meet the 80% or below AMI, and there are families out there that are above that, but still they're not in that area where they can afford to go to the the local banks to take out some loans there. So the assistance we'd like to see from the FHLBank system is maybe more of the grants or low interest or no interest loans, so that we can help these families out. Repayment is always an issue for our families out here. It's just not affordable. With our disaster loans that we have here, they're actually 0% interest for 30 years, and we only have them pay back 75% of the loan. The 25% is more in the form of a deferred loan or a grant. So for a $250,000 loan, the maximum payment for a person at the highest income category is about $520.83 a month. That's very, very affordable for families out here. The lowest is like $173 a month for the lower income bracket families, and the lower income bracket you are, the more subsidy you get. That's why you only pay back $173 a month because, 75% of the loan is subsidized. But yeah, maybe more marketing awareness for us here in the Marianas, because just from this forum here, I'm learning that there are other assistance that we can avail of. It's just that we're not aware of, and maybe we can work with Bank of Guam or Bank Pacific so that we can do some kind of partnership with FHL banks out there. So yeah, that's my take on it.
I think Jesse is talking to you, Philip. I think Maria, Jesse is letting you know what his interests are along with us. I mean, he's letting us know as well. What about you, Mary? Can you tell us some of those ideas as well?
What I know of Federal Home Loan Bank and what they do provide are, for funding for lending capital, for even for development. If there are any other programs that we can look at, funding that we can look at in terms of a grant, so that we can even cut the costs. If our member banks here are aware of any type of program that maybe Guam Housing can look into how best we can utilize the funds that's available, then we really appreciate that, because then we can defer to them with some questions we may have, and then we can further our questions with Federal Home Loan Bank. But it would be nice if I could ask the member banks here to share of any notification that I may have missed. I can go online and check, but if they know the program or the funding that's available, and if they can guide us with that, we can try to make it work. Even if we have to go under their sponsorship. So it's just missing out. And if I'm not aware of a program and it is available and they are aware, if we can get any type of heads up so that we can try to run with it. We wouldn't want to miss an opportunity that may address some of the concerns that we can help out with affordable housing. We looked at all kinds of so Guam, we looked at certain types of construction where you meet the typhoon coverage and all that. We explored using alternative building system to see what is out there that still would meet measures to protect the home from any type of disaster. So we're looking at maybe putting out something just to see what's the interest of alternative housing. So if that may drop the costs, of course, we are familiar that if it's going to increase the insurance part, for the coverage, for the homeowners coverage, that may just negate the savings. But we are exploring different ways to try to see how we can drop that cost. And we really, if there's anything that our member banks are aware of, share it with us in case I'm not able to catch it.
So, Mary, how does your organization typically find out these types of things? Do you have a grant writer on staff? Are you participating in any forums outside of this roundtable event? Are you going to websites? How is it that you guys get your information, find funding sources, that type of thing?
Okay, so we try to constantly communicate with federal agencies like Rural Housing Service or even GURA that has federal funding. What is available out there so that we can maybe address a component of what we're looking at to develop or to make available. We try to we don't have a grant writer here, so it's pretty much just a bunch of us. We get together, we look at if we are aware of anything, we get together, we see how we can make it work. We'll reach out to an agency that has had the experience and then go from there. We're always looking at how to participate in something of this similar forum where we can get more information so that we can avail ourselves to the types of programs that are being administered.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. My time is up, so I'm going to move on to Eric.
Can I jump in? Can you just jump about on the topic of better communication, better learning,
Sure.
better sharing? Give us our own seat on the board of directors. We sit when an election comes for the board, the CNMI and we and Hawaii vote, and we're never going to beat somebody from Hawaii. And the only way I got on the board is when Guam Housing was having their issues with a note that I think was Stan Rice at the time, called me and introduced himself and said, "Can you help us with this? Tell us who to hire." I said, "I'll do it." And in exchange for one thing, he goes, "What's that?" Eventually, Guam gets a seat on the board. So there was a lady from FHLBank, and she was on the board and she was retiring. She said, "Let me fill her unexpired term." But yet, if we can elect our own representative from our region, as opposed to watching Hawaii elect their guy. Because if I'm back in Hawaii, I'm in First Hawaii, I'm in America Saved, any of those places, I'm going to vote for the guy I know down the street, not from the guy in Guam or the girl in Guam.
I get that. I know the Des Moines Bank, after it merged with the Seattle Bank, there was a lot of different areas, states, districts and whatnot to consider when they were trying to figure out how the board makeup. I hear what you're saying, and it'll come across in this hearing. It may be a good idea to make or establish a relationship with the board members that's in Hawaii, though, to be able to kind of use their voice to help you while something like this is being figured out. So I'll pass that on, going to Eric for him to wrap things up for us.
Yeah, well, thank you, Renee. Before we did that, I did want to give all of you an opportunity. So Philip, thank you for that recommendation. Are there any other recommendations that anyone else has that could be brought forward to stimulate the relationship, to stimulate activity with the Federal Home Loan Bank, and to increase access with their products, and as well as their affordable housing program, their competitive and their set aside programs? Do you guys have any other recommendations other than the one Philip made?
I have one. It's kind of along the lines of what Jerry was saying about just having more stakeholder awareness and dialogue. So aside from the parties that are here on the line today, I feel like at least locally, the Guam Housing and Urban Renewal Authority, Guam Economic Development Authority, real estate professionals and developers. I've talked to all these different types of people about affordable housing, and there's some really brilliant people and everybody has these ideas, but I think what's missing is actually bringing all these stakeholders together to actually get something going. So, I mean, I don't know who is sort of like the ringleader to bring all the stakeholders together. Maybe it's us, but I do think that more dialogue at a local level, at a federal level, just to increase awareness of what's out there and how can we best leverage it, because I think there's a lot of passion and a lot of good ideas, but just not enough communication.
Great, thank you. So we want to be respectful of your time, the time you committed to work with us and to meet with us and to give us your suggestions. We really appreciate that. In the amount of time that we have remaining, we've asked you a lot of questions. What I'd like to do is turn it back to you. And do you have one most pressing need that you want us to be aware of, that we can look into, make recommendations about? I'm going to, if it's okay, I'm going to start with Jesse. And I'm going to put you on the spot, Jesse, but if you have that one pressing need, please let us know and then we'll move forward before we wrap this up.
Yeah, Eric, if I may, I'd just like to share with you the CDBG-DR program that we're administering. So we have a total of 312 approved and funded borrowers. That's around $98 million. However, there are also 100 approved but unfunded borrowers that are, on our wait list. And we launched this program in January of 2021. We had to close the intake in November of 2021 because there's just not much money available or left for the 154 pre-applicants that we reviewed and determined them eligible. So even with the amount of money that we received from CDBG-DR, we still have 254 families that are unfunded. So I don't know, from the government side, there's a shortage of funding assistance for us. So that's I don't know if FHLBank System can provide the same kind of programs, or we can do a like the one we did with USDA RD was an 80-20 split, where USDA provided 80%, the local program provided 20%, or any other kind of combination, just to stretch the federal dollars. So
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Gerard, can I pass the baton to you?
I don't know if there's any one pressing need that is going to that I can think of, but I think it begins with continual dialogue and having more and more ideas come to the table and just scrubbing them and then ultimately implementing them. There's no silver bullet. We've been trying to solve the affordable housing market since I can remember, and it's been when the hair on my face was on my head, not on my chin. So I don't believe there's a panacea. There's no silver bullet. It's just going to require continual dialogue, and there are a lot of different stakeholders. There's a lot of different moving parts. But if we continue to talk about it and hone in on an ultimate solution, I think we will get there. And it starts with, I believe, changing the voices that are making the pitch to make those changes, which ultimately is results in, well, ultimately means inclusion of more and more stakeholders.
Okay, thank you. Philip, you have your one.
Yes. Yeah, when pre-COVID, when our examination teams would come out, the safety and soundness teams, they see us every 18 months, and I think it's the same for you, Maria, and ANZ, which is no longer here. But they would hold a directors meeting, a directors board, I forget, directors conference, I forget what it was, directors college, that's what it was. And 3 or 4 of the examiners would be there for a day, and they just go over programs, they would go over regulations. There was a lot of Q&A, and everybody benefited, not just we, the member banks, but I think the FDIC benefited too. Now, I know we're another 7 hours, we're so far away, we're another 7 hours after Hawaii, and there's an expense to that. But COVID's in the rearview mirror. If you could send out a team to hold like a 1 or a day 2 conference, and then we could bring in those other people like Maria was talking about, Economic Development Authority, all of them, not just from Guam, but from Saipan. And we also have a member bank of the Federated States of Micronesia to bring them in. I don't know if they're members of the Home Loan Bank Board, but they are an FDIC bank. And I think their CEO spends most of his time in Saipan, if I'm correct, Jesse. But I think something like that would be really, really appreciated and would throw your picture on the front door of our homes.
Great. Thank you so much, Philip. Mary, I'm going to move to you.
As being a non-member, the availability of funds to address issues for projects like for infrastructure, for lending capital, for down payment assistance funding, what would be available as a non-member at the cheapest cost of funds so that we can pass on that savings to make programs available. We have programs that are interest-free for a second mortgage so that we can reduce the required down payment. We have programs for first time. We need to address the continued funding of these programs because we can see the need of these programs, but there has to be other ways to address the funding sources because those are depleting. And we would like to continue because it's not only available for our corporation, but as well as to the banks. We have programs that we work with the banks. We make available to the banks. So really, home ownership is for everyone that can avail themselves to, but it's always about the funding and how we can best continue these programs by identifying sources of funding for those.
Okay, thank you. So Maria, you kicked off a good recommendation before we started going the round robin. Do you have another one before we close, before we end?
No, I think I'll just end with what I said. Thank you.
Okay, great. So in closing, Renicia and I want to thank you for your time and your thoughtful remarks. They are valuable to get us to think about issues in Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands. Also, we would be remiss in not thanking the FHFA staff who have been behind the scenes making sure that this roundtable discussion, along with all those preceding this one, has been successful. And finally, as we enter the home stretch for soliciting stakeholder observations, perspectives, and ideas, I want to encourage everyone to make plans to join the wrap-up listening session, which is scheduled next week, March 22nd through the 24th. You can find more information about the upcoming listening session on FHFA's webpage. And finally, just want to say thank you. I've enjoyed speaking with all of you. Have a great day. And that's it. Thank you.